Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. Today we'll be speaking with Yvonne H. from the Mainely Agnostics Group in Portland, Maine. Yvonne shares her experience with meditation and the steps and a little history about her home group. Hello, Yvonne. Welcome to AA Beyond Belief. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking.
I know you're from the Mainely Agnostics Group in Maine, and I learned about you through an email that you sent Roger talking about the alternative steps, and I just thought that it was kind of interesting, your perspective and your experience. And I'd like to talk to you about all of that, and maybe a good way to begin is for you to tell us your AA story. You know, what got you in the rooms of AA and then into secular AA?
Oh, well, I'd be happy to. Thank you for having me on, and here I am representing our way far northeast version of Alcoholics Anonymous and the newer agnostic version of Alcoholics Anonymous, which has just bloomed within the past.
It's amazing.
The Agnostics Group here has been in existence. June was our 1-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And believe me, I celebrated. I showed up early with a balloon, and I offered to chair the meeting. That's how excited I was. How much it has done for me to enlighten me towards being able to be comfortable in following my own path.
Yeah.
In a program where everybody, believe me, the fellowship is, if there is a higher power, that is it, because I learned from other people how they do things, and it gave me a sense of belonging, which is exactly what I needed. And where my alcoholism took me was to places that, very alone, dark, lonely place.
Yeah.
I actually drank for 39 years. Give or take a year back, 15, 16, whenever it really sort of kicked in, but I recognized my alcoholic behavior. Predisposition to addictive behavior is how I term it, because now I have a son, a 15-year-old, who is, he admitted that he needed help, and I'm going to take him to AA, but his addiction is gaming, electronics. He's doing, and so he's been caught a couple times drinking, and the last recent time was cough syrup. So who knows what his substance is or could be if I don't help him in time.
Right.
But it's gaming part of the addictive behavior. So I'm recognizing that, and I see that in myself, and I believe you're born with it.
I think so, too.
I do believe it's a family disease. My father is an alcoholic. My mother is not. She has her own issues. She's a hoarder to the point of dysfunctional, addictive behavior. Absolutely. And my father, though I'm very proud and happy to say, is very close to 40 years sober now.
Wow.
He's done it all by himself. He's an atheist, self-proclaimed. So he tried a couple meetings early on back in 40 years ago.
Wow.
Smoke-filled rooms and a lot of older guys, God talk. Pushed him out, and he couldn't handle the smoke-filled rooms. Actually, really, he was there willingly to listen, but he had been a smoker himself, and he had borderline emphysema esophageal issues with his esophagus, and inhaling smoke, he couldn't handle that. So
yeah, I tell you, if people don't remember what AA was like when we all smoked, it was crazy. Yeah. I mean, you almost needed a gas mask to go in some of those meeting halls.
And I hear jokes about this half of the room they designated smokers, and the other half were non-smokers.
Yeah,
and everybody laughs. It's like
our group actually really did that.
Well, smokers and then passive smoke.
Right.
Smokers over here, right?
Yeah.
So and I smoked for 17 years of my life. I quit, and this is one of my things, is I was able to quit cold turkey just to prove to myself that I could quit if I wanted to.
Yeah.
So it was one of my addictions that I proved to myself. And then I had occasional cigarette while I was drinking at a party, but no more isolation smoking for me. I decided, I was ready to have children. So I quit like a year and a half before I even actually had a child, and I never went back to smoking. But boy, I'll tell you, in my little rehab stint of 28 days, I was the only non-smoker. So they'd all haul out there for cigarettes, and I'd be like, well, I'm isolated again, but not in a bad way. They're smoking in the freezing weather out there, and I'm just sitting here reading Living Sober. Was the book I picked up, and I started reading that. So anyway, back to my 39 years, which is, I kind of boil it down to decades. Before I even kicked into, now we're talking, all right, I may as well admit that I'm going to be 60 years old in December, because you can't see, so no comments on that. But
I'm not far from it myself.
So that gives you a time frame of where, like 1972, I was like butting right into the party scene in my hometown, little small town of Woodbury, Connecticut. And I'm very proud of that town. And Bethlehem, the town next to it, I had lived there first, which is really a cow town, or was. And then we had to be bused all the way to Woodbury to go past 6th grade. So really all the other grades I went through were all Woodbury. And then when my parents split up, they offered, where to live, and we said, well, we don't want to change schools. So obviously Woodbury was the choice. So that was a big social move for me. I no longer had to ride my bike 6 miles to get to town. Anyway, but it was a beautiful upbringing there. I just am so blessed that I had a beautiful upbringing in Connecticut, and the people I'm still very close with. When I go home to visit, 3.5-hour drive, I hit a meeting in my own hometown, and I always fully expect to see somebody that I know. But I haven't. I don't get there very often, maybe once or twice a year. So, but I love to raise my hand and tell my story that this is my home. I feel like I really always miss it. I have really good memories. My drinking did not take me to dark places. It took me to overindulgence quite a bit. And the choices that I made in my life with relationships and everything, jobs, and deciding not to continue my education was directly related to, like, why would I want to give up my party life? Every day I wake up and decide, well, where can I get my buzz today? And then working in restaurants was always really convenient, because I had the whole day to, pace myself and then work, and then get out at 11 and go out dancing and to the bars and sleep in the next day. That was my dream life. I didn't think of, like, I'm an artist. My dad's an artist. He made a living being an artist. I'm not in graphic design like I'd like to be. I'm in retail. But I always thought I could, that would work for me later. Later, procrastination. That's my character defect, as they say. But I don't feel like giving up my character defects like it says in the step. I don't want to give up my character defects. I'd like to learn who they are and accept them and let them go on their way.
Oh, okay.
Just like fear is something I was going to bring up. I think as a kid, before I started finding that a substance was awesome because it could take me out of myself, which evidently was fear-based about life itself. How can I survive in this world on my own? It's a scary place. Wasn't connecting with my mother emotionally, so she's just a closed-off emotionally person. And my dad was busy working and drinking, so I didn't really have any parental guidance in my emotional growth back then. So I was a fearful person, unbeknownst to me.
I relate to that.
Drinking really gave me an outward personality, but other than that, I was very introverted and different from other people, like I hear everybody else say, and I just am so glad I get to go to meetings to hear people say. I felt different from other people. I felt very closed off emotionally, and alcohol gave me the ability to fit in with other people and be buoyant and funny and beautiful and make me think that was my wonder drug, until it took over, of course. Many years later, I was, again, able to manage it and function. Therefore, I gave myself permission to continue because I thought I could control it. So that mind game, disease versus mind, carried on for many, 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 many years. I was enjoying the teenage life, and instead of, I didn't even finish high school. I ran away from home at 16. My girlfriend and I said, winter sucks. Let's go to Florida.
Okay.
So we packed our backpack and stuck out our thumbs, and we, a couple days later, we're on the beach in Florida. Our parents didn't know where we were.
Mm-hmm.
We had no intention of going back anytime soon. We were little rebels and defiant and said, well, let's see what we can get away with. And we laughed our way all the way down there and found some people living on the streets, and back then it was much more safe, I think. I don't even remember any hard drugs. I've never done hard drugs. I mean, I've seen it done around me once or twice.
Yeah.
And I didn't leave the room, but I'm like, well, as long as there's alcohol around me, then I'm fine.
Right.
So that's my story right there. But a substance is a substance is a substance, and when you're finding your like-minded people, like I was, then life was good.
Yep.
And we had actually I thought I was pretty lucky to have a decent experience of being a 16-year-old kid on the streets down there, panhandling for cigarettes, and somehow we all fed each other. One person rented a little apartment, and it turned into a crash pad, and we all just found our little place on the floor to camp out, and the weather was nice, and we're laughing because everybody up in Connecticut was freezing, and we had no mindset about, do you realize what we're doing to our parents? And I have made amends.
Yeah.
My father told me, do you know what you did to your mother? We had no idea where you were for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, it was before I came back. Because they didn't beg me to come back, and they didn't come down to find me. Although my girlfriend, who I went down there with, her older sister came down all right and found her on the streets. And you can't physically make somebody go home.
Yeah.
So she didn't. But at least the older sister was able to go back to Connecticut and report that, we're alive and well, and we're then my parents found out that we were alive and well and said, "Could you just please call home?" Was the only message. That's what we got. I'm like, uh-oh. See, but those things didn't bother me at the time, and it bothers me now that it didn't bother me at the time, of course. But that was full-blown alcoholism working in my life there at the teenage years. Like I said, I wasn't running. I was thinking I was running to something, but really what I was running away from was myself, because I wasn't getting life the way I thought I wanted it to be.
Right.
I had a beautiful home and wonderful parents. We sat and had dinner every night by candlelight and classical music, only because that was the way my parents preferred FaceTime. You can do whatever you want, and there's not a lot of established rules or strict behavior or, manners, because both of them had that when they were up. And so they thought they would raise their children more free and liberal. But at dinner time was, whether you're hungry or not, you sit at the table and it's FaceTime, and you wait till everybody's done, or you ask permission to leave the table, whatever. And that was, I thought, I'd have friends over, and they're like, wow, you gotta wait till everybody's done, or ask permission to leave if you're done first and you have something to do, because they're going to ask, why do you want to leave? Because it's not about the food or feeding yourself.
Right.
It's about face time and family time.
Right.
So there's 4 people in my family, including my parents. My younger sister's 2.5 years younger than myself. So we really were equals at the dinner table. It wasn't parents and kids. It was 4 human beings sharing their lives together.
Nice.
Is how I look back at it, and it was very, very precious to me, and my parents are still on that level. They really never sat me down and just quickly, like when I brought up my son with the taking me up on my offer to go to a meeting, because he'd been in trouble with the cough syrup, and then suicidal behavior was mentioned to a counselor, and I'm right in the midst now of calling the school counselor, because he knows what's going on, and my ex-husband we're on amicable terms, and he's explained all this to me via phone call, and so I'm on it. I recognize my behavior in my own son.
Right.
Anyway, the first thing I explained to my son was, I didn't have a parent that sat me down and offered to listen to me, or suggest or explain that, hey, I have that too. I recognize that in you. My father knew I was a rebel and defiant, but he had his own issues at the time. He was active alcoholism.
Yep.
And my mother was freaked out by it, and she saw it in me, and she didn't know how to handle it in him, and she didn't know how to handle it in me. So she just looked the other way for all those years. I can't remember once her sitting me down going, geez, you smelled like a brewery last night. Where'd you go, a keg party? let's talk about that. And, did say I smell like a brewery, but she didn't say anything else. So I at least have the experience, strength, and hope behind me of getting into AA at the age of, 54 or something like that.
Okay.
And which is the same exact age my dad got sober.
Wow.
And my message to my son would be, don't bother continuing in the path that you think you may end up in, trying to get out of your head with a substance. Let's find other ways to get help and enlighten yourself to really, I think somebody recently mentioned serenity as a subject. Once you get into recovery and you have a few years in you and you feel like you're on the right path, you get a serenity that, like, you start to trust yourself. That, and now you know what it's like to be without a substance for a while, and then you get that irritable, restless, and discontent feeling comes and goes, which we all have as addicts. But you now have more coping skills, and you can look at life in a different perspective. Like, yeah, tough times. It's a rough day, but I'm not reaching for something.
Right.
I'm learning as I go how to just be happy that I don't feel like the need to reach for something. And
yeah, that's a big difference.
That alone. And for me, finding that place, that serenity, comes with meditation. That has been very huge for me since the agnostic meetings, because I felt like I have sort of let go of the mainstream AA, but I still need as much input. But I don't get it through mainstream AA as much as, like, one agnostic meeting can last me the whole week as far as serenity goes, because I'll just hear what I need to hear from somebody.
Right.
And it has a lot to do with letting go of the ego, but still being able to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And self-realization and all those other self terms come into mind. But when I try to explain it to mainstream AA, it does sound egotistical, like I don't need God, I don't need anything, but I have the ability to connect with my inner being, my soul possibly, my guidance, my insight, and it is hard to put into terms. But it's in there, and I connect with it through meditation, and it guides me. So for me, it's not a higher power, it's an inner power.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned meditation, because I'm trying to, I need to start doing that.
Good. Yeah. I'm talking to the right person. It's not easy.
No, it's not. I think of it like as exercise. It's like, it's so hard to get into the habit of doing it. But then once I get into the habit of doing it, I get the results and benefits from it, and I enjoy it, and I look forward to doing it. But if I'm not doing it, man, it's so hard to get back into the routine again. And that's where I'm at. I haven't been meditating for years now, but I did for on and off for quite a number of years, and I always loved it when I was doing it. And a lot of times I would do it in conjunction with physical exercise. The two kind of go together for me.
Right, because it is a relaxing of the mind as well as relaxing of everything else. And my suggestion would be possibly go into a good bookstore and look at the self-help and find out how, like the Buddhist.
Yeah.
I lean towards the Buddhist embracing of nothingness, embracing of letting go of everything. I should say divesting and being.
Right.
And people who look to God as their higher power, or a higher power that is strong enough for them to ask and pray for the strength and for the guidance, is more of, to me, like a reliance on something. Just like a reliance on alcohol, they're now relying on getting something from somewhere else to fulfill their needs.
Right.
Whereas what I clicked into the medication, and I just grabbed in my book, The Joy of Living by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. Somebody gave me that, The Joy of Living. And there's a lot of good books out there. Not one in particular, but just opening up a book and maybe clicking into something that reminds you that, that's what I remember what that meditation was like.
Yeah. It's a good
I mean,
idea. It helps you train your mind. Like what you were talking about, letting go.
Divest.
What I like to do when I meditate is I just kind of let I don't try to block out my thoughts. I kind of use my thoughts. I say, okay, my brain is just going to do what my brain does, and thoughts are going to pop into my head. But what I do is I say, I don't have to grab onto that thought. I can just let that thought drift away. And it's just kind of like I sit there with my thoughts and I let them just float by. And it's just a really good way for me to train my mind, I think, about how to let go of things, because I need to do that. I mean, how many times, I might be in a situation at work or something and I get mad about something and I just can't let go of the thought. So that's that's why I like meditation so much. It helps me with the letting go and controlling my mind. I see it as exercise for the mind, and maybe, you can see it as something spiritual too, but that's how I kind of see it. And I do enjoy it.
Yes. And I'm also as, less on a spiritual and more of an exercise.
Yeah.
Myself. And, I'm trying to think now. I have my Bible in my hand, which is Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. Finally, Daily Reflections for Non-Believers, Freethinkers, and Everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't even think it's from one person. I think it's a...
Oh, yeah.
I don't think
it's a really good book. We use it at our meetings.
Joe C. Oh, do you? Well, that doesn't surprise me. So, about just touching on the meditation thing, because I get from this book so much that I can't even put into words. Mm-hmm. But it's in my head and it clicks with me, and I realize I'm not on a wrong path. I think I'm on the right path, but I can say I'm not on the wrong path. When I'm clicking with things from the book, such as, just get into your meditation and find your own way. Yeah. If I could find the term that really explains what meditation is for me, and I work with a person who's not an AA, but he goes hiking a lot, really into the mountains, and he goes out there. So he knows I'm in recovery, and when I told him what I had heard, to try to explain where we go in our lives when he's in the mountains and I'm meditating, the same process of meditation or connecting with your inner spirit, your energy, your guide, the energy that existed before you were born into human form, and that will likely live beyond your human form. It is energy, and energy cannot be created or destroyed.
That's right.
Ask any scientist. That's Einstein coined that one.
Yep.
And so what is that energy? Without delving too much into it, because it's mind-boggling.
It is.
The space that we go into is the space between thoughts. Ah. So like you were saying, thoughts come and go, but the actual split-second timing of in-between thoughts is where the Buddhists and the monks train their mind to go.
Interesting.
They are with letting their mind find the place between thoughts.
Oh.
It's very difficult. It takes training. It's an exercise. And how difficult is it? It's very difficult, right?
Right.
But that's the place where you find your serenity.
Isn't that interesting?
And when I talk to somebody who just doesn't even have addictive behavior, my buddy in the mountains, he's like, bingo. That's why I go to the mountains and walk my butt off for 10, 15 miles. Yep. It's because it takes the first 5 miles to get all those thoughts out of the way. Right. And then before I turn around and on the return trip, I found myself at the top of the mountain looking. And all of a sudden, there's no thoughts in my brain. There's just being. Yep. And I went, wow, he understands what I'm saying. How can that be? He doesn't even have what I have. But he has the same goal because he's experienced that instant of space between thoughts.
That is so interesting.
You are being. You are being, and you're connecting with your being. Wow. I don't know if I put that into words correctly, but as long as you can understand what I'm saying.
I love it.
And I heard that about you, and that you miss meditating, and I said, so you're not new at meditating. But you want to get back to it, and that's what you miss about it.
Yep.
And that's where I'm finally getting myself. Because
Well, I need it really
I'm meditating more. I was meditating for my first. Now my sobriety date is February 20th, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about. I'll be coming up on 6 years this February. So for the first 4 years, I did it mainstream AA, and I just couldn't find that space in between thoughts because I was overwhelmed with turning my life and my will over to the care of God. And I tried. I joined Big Book Step Study. I had sponsors who made me go to my knees and pray.
When did you start going to meetings, Yvonne? And what was your impression of those meetings? How were you treated? What were you thinking? What was your experience
All
with that?
AA meetings or any?
When you started off, you started going to traditional meetings.
I was introduced to AA through rehab. I didn't want to go to AA. I was in a 27-year marriage to a person who was very passive as far as enabling.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would get drunk, and at the end he would be like, I'm going to call the cops to put you in protective custody for your own good. He never did. But that was as far as the threats would go, and taking away the car keys, and be like, he wouldn't want me drunk around the kids. He'd be like, go to bed then. And I'd be like, awesome, because I can go up there and close the door, and I got wine in the closet. I'll be like having a party here. That was my goal, was to like escape my own family. Woohoo! Mm-hmm. So that was pretty sad. And eventually the ultimatum came, is like, I have to go get help. And I was really talking to an excellent counselor therapist person, wasn't even a psychiatrist, that suggested, 28-day rehab would be really good for you to get out of that element that you're in, that you keep going back to, which is isolation.
Right.
And it would be good to be around it. Anyway, she used to work there, and she worked on me for a while. She was a very good listener, because I just swing by and buy vodka at Rite Aid after I would meet with her once a month, and like, oh, good, now I'm good for a whole month. I don't have to go back to talk to her. So it took years, but I finally took her up on the rehab, went there, and got out of that element and away from the enabling husband, because that was just a vicious circle.
Sure.
And he already threw his hands up and said, because he researched everything, he's an IT technical person, researched addiction, and threw his hands up and said, I don't understand addiction. You're going to have to go get help, basically, meaning on your own. I can't help you. And that would have been a time for somebody to go to Al-Anon, really, if they were willing to go find out, but that wasn't his choice at the time, so that's okay. That's all behind me.
Sure.
During the rehab, of course, it was really a beautiful stay in a nice old farmhouse, 16 women. Every other night they'd take us out. Every other night we'd stay in and do meetings. So there's AA meetings in a group with other women. 5, 6 of us would be. So that was my comfort zone. If I can go into AA like holding somebody's hand, then it wouldn't be a scary thing. But that was where I first said, my name and that I'm an alcoholic out loud. So I even heard myself say it. And I've been doing that ever since. I need to be reminded every single day who I am and what I am. So that was helpful, getting that out of the way. And we have all kinds of meetings, discussion meetings, speaker discussion. We got the big book meetings. We have just speaker meetings where you can sit in the audience, and it's open, usually meetings where you can bring your kid, bring your friends. I bring my dad. He's willing to go to meetings. My mother even goes to meetings to see what it's all about, and she has her own addictive behavior, but it's not alcohol, and says to me, this is a good design for living, these steps. It's basically laid out where you can, not do the God thing or the God thing, and that doesn't come up in discussion, but a way to find your own way through life. And the steps, the 12-step program it's 80-something years old now.
Right.
I personally believe it needs to be revived, and through the AA Agnostica online, our meeting found an alternate version of steps, and they tweaked it a little bit. And So I love my meetings. I go to. I really still do try to plan my day around meetings rather than plan my meetings around my day.
Right.
And I go, there's nooners, there's women nooners, there's.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have my buddies. I go and I give hugs, and it's just like it's family.
Right.
And I've been divorced 5 years, and I've never felt alone or isolated in my house because of the kids all live with their dad. But it's only 2 miles away, so we're co-parenting.
Mm-hmm. So before
yeah.
you went to the agnostic group, were you okay at the traditional meetings?
I would say 80% of me was okay with traditional meetings. There was still that 20% that after 1 year of recovery, sobriety, I said, okay, well, you know, I said to myself, I had quit drinking to appease everybody, including myself and my disease, for a year. And after a year, I said, oh, well, shit, you know, I know I can do it. So, hell, bring on the wine, and we'll only have one glass. And then put the bottle down and look and stare at it for a while. And, of course, you know, like everybody else, the one glass and then 2 glasses and then 2 bottles within a couple months, back into it. So after a year of AA, I said, now I need to get serious because I don't trust myself yet. I don't trust the disease. So I got right into Big Book Step study.
Okay.
That lasted probably 3/4 of a year. I had an awesome sponsor who said, if you do the steps exactly the way they're written, give up your life to God, find a higher power, you will have a spiritual experience. I promise you that, she said.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I got on my knees and did the 3rd step prayer with her and all this stuff, but, you know, what I was doing was clenching my teeth through it.
Right.
And I wasn't aware of it, but it was not a comfort zone for me at all.
No.
But I did everything I was told, and after the Big Book Step study, I was more self-assured that I could find my way through AA, just mainstream AA, without the Big Book Step study. It was just too disciplined for me personally.
Right.
So I let go of that, letting go. You know, I knew it was there, and my sponsor, Big Book Step Study sponsor, said, I'll always be here for you, and she's still a good friend, and I can always go back. And she's like, you know, you'll be back, because this is where it's at. And I never went back.
She was looking at it different than how we look at it. It's so weird. Yeah. My frustration between us and the regular AA people is that we really have much more in common than not. It's just the thing is that she's thinking that these steps are going to bring us closer to God, so that we have the spiritual experience, and which helps us stay sober. Whereas we just say these actions that we take are going to transform us. Yes. And what's so frustrating is the actions are the same on her part and our part. The only difference is that she thinks there's a God, a supernatural being that is somehow empowering her through that, and that the process is bringing her closer to that power. We just leave that part out. We might think, okay, this process is bringing me closer to the people that's in the rooms.
This is true. So my question all these years has been, well, if the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is all about honing your relationship with God or a higher power to enable you to stay sober, then what is it that I'm doing?
Right. And that's the problem, because the Big Book...
Am I honing my relationship with myself? Now, that sounds egotistical. So how would I say my spirit, my soul? Because
the way I see it, Yvonne...
AA, that, like, you and your soul are buddies.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
Well, when the Big Book was written, it was just the experience of the people at that time who were coming out of a very religious experience. But unfortunately, what's happening now, some 80 years later, people are taking that experience that those people from some religious movement had back in the 1930s. They're taking that experience as a literal thing that we need to replicate now, instead of saying, hey, we can learn from what these people, these people felt, that this is what they believed were happening to them. They believed that they had a God that transformed them. And I can understand why they would feel that way, because when you stop drinking or drugging, It does feel like something that you can't explain, something that was beyond your power to do ever before has suddenly happened. And I could see where you could attribute it to a God or something. But we just don't do that, you and I and other people like us. But I guess that the thing is, if they study that big book, I wish they wouldn't study it so literally. And I wish that they would be able to say, okay, this is what it was at that time, and this is how I see it for myself today in the year 2016. But they don't. They like to say, no, it says right here on this page that the purpose of this book is to bring you closer to God. And that's what the big book does say. I mean, it really is trying to bring us to God.
Yep. And my favorite thing now to do is, and they, when I celebrate my anniversary and or at my home group, am able to get in a word edgewise at the podium because it's a speaker. I pick up the big book and I go to page 417, and so they see me holding that big book, and I'm reading from it. And I say, and my whole recovery is on this one page. And they're like waiting with bated breath. And I read acceptance. And when I read acceptance, the part of nothing happens in God's world by mistake. I omit the word God, and I replace it with our world.
There you go. So nothing happens in our world by mistake.
And people who know it by heart, they notice that I miss the word God and I put our world. But by the time I'm done with the whole thing, it flows.
Oh yeah, pretty much everything works without God. Really, it does.
They understand why I omitted it. It wasn't to make people. It wasn't to upset people. It was my perspective only. And they're going. I see the look on their faces. A whole room full of people, and they say, "Oh, well, that's what works for her." Because that's the way I explained it to people. This is what works for me. Acceptance, because that's what I do when I meditate. Is like I am in full acceptance of where I was. And where I am right now, and if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be okay today, and hopefully what I do today will help me tomorrow. And it's that simple. It's not like rocket science.
No.
Maybe it is, actually, for an addict to be able to be sober one day at a time, personally speaking, because I drank for so many years thinking I can control this. So I'm always wary that, that little voice is going to, tap me on the shoulder and say, look, go down that aisle. There's vodka down there. But I've been, totally not bothered by any of that, and very grateful for it. And my father, his wisdom, 40 years sober, just says to me, you can never drink again, right? You can never drink a drop of alcohol again for the rest of your life. You understand that? And I would say, yes, I do, Dad. And he would say, very good. And so that's all I hear from him. There's no lecture. There's no, his meditation is listening to music and doing his art. So he's found his space between thoughts. He lets the music take the thoughts. He does his art to get things out of him. He lets the music come in and the art go out. So he's become a vessel of being. And I can see that in him. He's very centered, and he has that serenity, man. And he didn't get it through any AA. So I'm blessed. I feel I'm blessed because I've gotten my enlightenment through the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I am totally indebted to them, all those people who show up at meetings to claim their seat. And therefore, my greatest joy and mission is to give back. And like I am right now, sharing. If I can find one person who can relate to going into a AA meeting and looking at the steps on the wall saying, this is not going to work for me, don't focus on that. So just keep coming back, and you will definitely hear something that will help you sooner or later.
Speaking of
but
those
if you don't keep coming back, you're not going to hear it. So
tell me about Mainely Agnostics, the alternative steps that you were using, and your situation with your central office.
Central office.
And because your group is your group is a year old now, is that right? It's a little over a year.
June, yep,
Okay,
June.
gotcha.
And it started with four guys. Four guys who are long-term sobriety. We used to call it old-timers. Now we call it long-timers.
Right.
20, 30 plus years, who really were agnostic, and a couple are self-proclaimed atheists who got together and said, it's time for a meeting for everybody, including us. Not a meeting just for us, but a meeting where people can be free thinkers, period. And since mainstream AA doesn't know what a free thinker is specifically, because it's not in black and white somewhere,
Right.
we will call ourselves agnostics.
There you go.
And mainly agnostics, spelled like the state of Maine, throwing an E there, in there, Mainely.
Right.
Had to put that plug in because they spelled it wrong on the meeting list.
Oh, great.
L-E-Y, but it's E-L-E-Y. It's
Right.
like, no, we're trying to, do this for everybody. First one of its kind around. Portland has a wonderful, excellent, large, very available recovery web of meetings. And actually, the Portland group, which is still alive and well after all these years, 40-something maybe, is started the Chip Club. I guess that's their claim to fame. They actually started the Chips. You familiar with the Chips?
Yeah, they're the ones that started that. I never knew that.
Yep. That's their proclaim. Who knows? I don't know if the fact checkers have checked that. We all need fact checkers, but Portland, Maine, supposedly they started out very, very long time ago. So, and Maine is a huge state, huge, and I'm lucky enough. I'm, like I said, originally from Connecticut, and the meetings are small in small towns, but Portland, Maine, and I don't live right in Portland. I live a couple towns out, and there are 1 or 2 meetings a week here, but for the most part, we got to drive into Portland, not that far. I feel sad that people are further out and don't get as much opportunity, because there's 4 or 5 meetings a day, 6 meetings a day here, all hours of the day in Portland, and it's people come here for recovery from Massachusetts, New Hampshire, anywhere in the country, because they keep hearing that the recovery community is so awesome here. Unfortunately, Governor LePage, who I hold personally responsible for pulling funding for rehabs and detoxes and recovery and putting more cops on the beat, because if we kill the dealers and shoot them down, then there won't be as many addicts, is his point of view. Sorry about that. I just had to put that in there. I know people who work at the very overloaded one detox in Portland.
Right.
And it's just insane. People lining up, they're sleeping on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Because there's no beds, there's no help, and they're overloaded. So I volunteer when I can. And it's just a sad thing out there. And there's, alcohol's not the only issue. I was only one of 4 people in my rehab out of 16. Opiate addicts are very. Opiates are very addictive over here.
Right.
And it's pulling a lot of young people. And now, and that was 5 years ago when I first got sober. Now it's like this synthetic heroin stuff, and I'm telling you, it's a scary world. Young people are raising their hand in meetings, going, I've just lost another friend. They sent me up here from Worcester, Massachusetts, and 4 of my friends OD'd and died last week. I mean, they go on with these stories that are scary, sad, and true.
Yep.
And times are tough out there. And I'm looking at my 15-year-old going, I thought cough syrup was bad? Let's grab him before he reaches out for whatever those dealers are handing out.
Yep.
Because the dealers are handing stuff out, and it's killing kids.
It's frightening.
So we have an epidemic, of our own here. But the AA community, reeling back to what mainstream AA and the alternative steps, which I kind of wish I had a copy of. I took that copy because we would read that in the beginning of the meeting, and I had copies made, and I would hand them out to people who wanted them and say, there are more on the desk here if anybody wants a copy of this stuff. Well, the mainstream, and then I would raise my hand at other meetings and say, "There's an agnostic meeting now for free thinkers." And these guys, the GSR and all those guys, two of them came in to join our meeting once, and I recognized one guy who's my buddy, who's like, there's no way I'd ever see him in an agnostic meeting because he has his higher power established. So I was wondering, I'm curious, and I didn't know this other guy who was the higher up mainstream AA representative.
Okay. And
they heard that we read the alternative steps.
Okay.
And I tried to hand him a copy, and he's like, "No way." And I'm like, "Ooh, I wasn't expecting that attitude. Why are you here?" So after the meeting, he came to me and the four guys who started the meeting, and he said, "Okay, all right, you guys are busted."
Did he really say that?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He said, "We have pulled your meeting off the meeting list until further notice, and you are not even considered AA at all anymore because, A, you don't have a big book on the table." And we're like, "Oh, we can fix that." They're like, "Oh, no, there's more.
You have to have a big book on the table."
This was so dramatic because he was pulling the authoritative, I represent AA as a whole thing. And here we are just like trying to help people. And we're like, you gave us permission to be on the meeting list.
So you violated the rule of not having a big book on the table.
That was one. And the second one was reading steps of our own. We're like being, and they're,
because you did start your meeting reading those steps, right? You started the meeting by reading those steps?
We did.
Okay.
And even though we were in an AA hall where there are the 12 steps and traditions behind us on the wall, we had a version to suggest to people that it was an alternative. And you can find all that. I think it was Gabe. Very close to Gabe's, like on AA Agnostica online. There's many versions. There's Buddhist. There's American Indian versions of spirituality.
And of course, you can read anything you want to in an AA meeting, but of course, this guy doesn't know that, but that's all right.
Well, this is Maine, and this is New England, and this is like puritanical stuff going on. They make their own rules, I think. But he goes, well, and I'll tell you why this step, in particular, why we can't read our own steps, especially the bottom line where it says, helping other alcoholics find recovery. We substituted the word addicts. Okay. And in mainstream AA, that's a wrist slapper. We do not use the word addicts in mainstream AA. Yeah. Then it's another group. You can go to NA, you can go somewhere else. And we were floored, our jaws all dropped, going, this is a meeting for everybody. Addicted to anything, food, sex, gambling, anybody's welcome in here. This is why we started the meeting. And they're like, well, then you're not AA. And we're like, but we want to be AA. We want to reach out. We want to be online on the meeting list. We want to be on the paper meeting list. They're like, well, until you fix those things, you are not considered AA. Oh, boy. And he left, and we went, uh-oh. What are we going to do? Because we really need to be on that meeting list to be available to people. Right. We're not a rogue group. No. We're just trying to be an alternate group. Right. So we didn't pre-read our steps anymore. We were really pissed that we can't use the word addict. Right. And even suggesting that addicts are welcome in our group or meeting. And that personally, that's what ticked me off the most. Yeah, that's a problem right now in AA, in my opinion. There's a weird stream going through of the singleness of purpose that's being taken to an extreme. The only requirement for membership in AA is a desire to stop drinking. So you can be addicted to anything else. You could be addicted to heroin. You could be addicted to gambling. You could be addicted to anything. As long as you have a desire to stop drinking, you're welcome in that meeting. And you can talk about whatever you want to. If your gambling problem is causing you issues that could cause a return to drinking, you can talk about it. It's just like
that's the way. That's AA. I mean, that's it. The only requirement for membership is supposed to drink. But unfortunately, these people that are doing that are taking it to the extreme, they're quoting a long form of that tradition where it says AA is for all who suffer from alcoholism, or whatever.
Yes.
And they're giving that such a narrow interpretation as if to say this means that only if you have only specifically an alcohol problem, and that's the only thing you can talk about at meetings. Well, this thing that's so stupid is rarely do we even talk about our actual addiction or drinking. We're usually talking about the stuff that's under the feelings and the emotions and all the stuff underneath that anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just so crazy, but that's the problem. And now you're dealing with an epidemic. There's this heroin epidemic all over the country, really, but I know it's really strong in New England. And you got to be there for these people. And I know that anyone that's a recovering addict, I mean, they also have a desire to stop drinking. I mean, I have not yet met anyone that says that, okay, I can do drugs. I mean, I can't do drugs, but I can drink. Maybe they're out there, but I have not run into that.
Yep. And in my case, I have a kid addicted to games.
Yep.
And that's an addiction. And open it up, folks. I mean, so I do, the third tradition saves my butt at meetings because I kind of open my whole thing with that a lot of times when I know that if somebody's going heavy on the God stuff, I'm like, but, that works for you, and that's awesome, but it doesn't work for everybody like you say it does and you say it will because it's in black and white. Excuse me, there are other people who come and go from here, and you don't want to keep them out of here. I could have easily just left, but since I was in rehab, they kept me coming back. I just said, oh, this isn't for me because look at these people. It's like going to church.
Yeah,
I said, that's not doing anything for me. And so
I was at a meeting last night that was truly like a revival meeting, but it was kind of fun. But it was a traditional meeting, but it was unlike anything that you it's unreal. But anyway, it was fun.
Well, I researched like Quad A. I've been online doing all that, and the Atheists and Agnostics of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's like all over California, the Southwest. There's some in Florida that I want to go to Tampa and look up. There's one in St. Petersburg I want to go look up when I go down and visit this winter. And I've been to meetings down there, and they're bigger meetings because Florida has a lot of people. So I am happy to represent recovery in Portland, Maine when I go down there and go, I bring my fellowship with me wherever I go. And that's a blessing and a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
But here I am. I'm going to bring my kid to an AA meeting, and I've been talking to my AA buddies. Is there anything you would recommend? Have you heard of anybody with young teenagers, like NA meetings, or And there isn't anything out there right now, obviously, because we have the drug addicts coming to AA meetings, and just simply like they even did in rehab, all the opiates, just substitute alcohol for whatever it is in your mind when we're reading out of the book. And so that I'm going to have to establish with him is like any addiction is what we're talking about, and just focus on people's recovery from whatever that is. Because he's going to say, well, I don't know, cough syrup, is that alcohol? I don't know. I don't even drink. I'm like, oh, but yeah, but you do.
Yeah, cough syrup is
that he's had incidents. The first one was alcohol.
Right.
He got very drunk, and the second one was then the cough syrup.
Right.
He stayed home for days afterwards with being sick.
Well, here's another problem, Yvonne, about the taking this thing to the extreme, to the singleness of purpose thing. Newcomers, they don't even know when they go to their first AA meeting. They don't know what an alcoholic is. They might not know if they are an alcoholic.
Yeah.
They need to find out, and maybe, people say, well, go to open meeting. No. They, so that's what's so crazy. I mean, we had this situation once, and I'm at fault here because I had some people that were giving me a hard time about singleness of purpose and accusing us of not being an AA group and all this kind of crap. Well, anyway, I was at a meeting, our We Agnostics meeting, and we had a guy come in for the very first time, and he was talking about being eating too much, having an overeating problem, right? And then another guy was there at the meeting saying that he had a marijuana problem. Okay, well, I was all paranoid because I had this person telling me that we weren't a real A group because we had druggies or whatever. And so I turned to the guy that was overeating. I said, "Hey, you do know this is a closed AA meeting for people with a desire to stop drinking." And okay, so the desire to stop drinking. This guy's like, "Okay, what does that mean? What desire to stop drinking?" And so he says, "Well, do I need to leave?" And we said, "No, we don't want you to leave." So we made that an open meeting. Well, it turned out the guy does want to stop drinking. He just didn't know our stupid language. When I said, "Do you have a desire to stop drinking?" He said, "I don't know. I just know that drinking is messing with me right now. I need to do something. Do I need to stop? I guess so. And it turns out now he's just introduced himself as an alcoholic. He does have a desire to stop drinking, but he didn't know that. That's a weird question to ask somebody. Do you have a desire to stop drinking? Are you an alcoholic? Well, I don't know. All I know is that I'm drinking a lot and it seems to be causing me problems, and it manifests itself in these different ways. So it's like what happens, and I'm rambling a little bit, but what happens is when we start quizzing people because of this, it throws them off and it makes them feel like, they're under some kind of pressure. Just let people discover for themselves if they belong in the meeting or not. That's how I feel.
Yes, and I specifically pay attention to old timers. How do they say what they say? If they've been in it long enough and they have a message, when they raise their hand, I pay attention. And when I first came in, I paid a lot of attention to the people who have stories about going back out and coming back in, because I didn't want that ever to happen to me. I'm a white chip wonder, as they say. I never had a desire to pick up a drink since I was willing to get sober. I latched onto that, and my experience has been a wonderful thing. That even with the living alone isolation thing, I have one walking distance to the liquor store over here. I could just not even drive and go back for more, and it would be a wonderful downward spiral for me. I would never get busted for drunk driving. So I had all these thoughts in my mind, but basically, that was where my attention was focused in the beginning. Was like, I'm afraid of going, but I'm afraid of that disease poking its head back in and going back out. And they have the stories of like, not all of us are lucky enough to come back in here.
Right, true.
Guilt, shame, and remorse keep us back out there drinking. And I'm thinking, oh God, that could be me. And then later, after I was like, hey, I got 4 years under me now. I'm now 5. What I do is I pay attention to the message. How can I relay my message to where it will help somebody?
Right.
And one of my favorite old timer guys is Ed, who he's a whoop ass kind of guy, and he's just very neutral and agnostic guy. So his message is, I didn't come to AA to stop drinking. I came to AA to stay stopped.
Right.
That's his simple message, and it took me really years to understand what he was talking about. Because it's not easy to decipher what he meant. Like, what do you mean you didn't want to stop drinking? He's like, oh, well, anybody can do that, but how long do you stop for? And I'm like, that was me.
Yeah.
I did that for a year. I want to stay stopped now. And that is what made him want to keep coming back. He wants to stay stopped.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It was so obvious. It was staring me right in the face, and I didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, your group got back on the meeting list, so and I guess that it wasn't quite so easy, but you had to let them know that you were complying with everything. So
Yep.
So what did you do? How'd you do that?
Yep. Really, the GPR guy was group representative for this district guy, who's the higher up, who was in agreement with the guys who started the meeting to start that type of a meeting. And they were in compliance with him. They got back with him and said, okay, well, we really want to help people, so we'll put the big book back on the table. Didn't even realize it wasn't there to begin with. Sorry about that. I mean, we'll just grab it off the shelf. It's right there. We'll put it on the table. And I said, good, because I'm going to be picking it up for acceptance now and then, even though I have my own copy. I will whip out the acceptance, and whenever I share my anniversary, I read it out loud.
Yeah.
And people just go, oh my God, you're not supposed to read stuff at a meeting when you're standing up there. I've heard that before. You shouldn't probably read stuff. But then I get other people thanking me. Oh, you reminded me that acceptance is, everybody has their own perspective on acceptance, because acceptance is a talk you have with yourself
Right.
on a daily basis, and it can change depending on your level of restlessness, irritability, and discontent.
Yeah.
So, eventually it all starts to make sense. And, the other thing was we had to not read our alternative steps out loud. We could suggest that they're out there for people, and I do raise my hand and say that there's a lot online for agnostic. If that's the direction you're going in, then it's online, there's help out there, there's alternative things, and people thank me for that. I didn't realize that.
We've had members of our group write their own steps, and we save those in a notebook binder, and we let people see them so that if they ever want to write their own steps, they can use those, or they can use someone else's steps. Plus, we also have the books, the alternative 12 steps, and the little book that has all the different versions of the steps too, and we have those out there for people to look at so they can.
That is great. We're not as free-spirited to be able to do that, but I took it upon myself to make copies of the steps that we use, and I literally have given that whole stack away through time, through the year. People ask me, come to me after meetings, and I raise my hand, are there any AA announcements? And I used to say, oh, well, now there's an agnostic meeting for people. And then after a year, I was very proud to say, oh, the agnostic meeting's still alive and well, and we celebrated an anniversary, and we could use some support if you're interested. It's on Monday nights, blah, 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 blah. And people come up to me after a meeting and ask me about it, and I hand them the copy, and I go, if this helps you. Right. This is available. If this helps you, this is just one more version of the 12 steps that seems to help people. So I'm trying to be careful how I reword it. We're not starting a cult. We're not going against AA. We're not a rogue group. We're, I have to explain more what we're not than what we are. Yeah. So for now, it's been working, and I did a funny little thing that I noticed the last time I mentioned, and it was when Ed, the I Want to Stay Stopped guy, was chairing a meeting randomly on a Tuesday night, and I, of course, was the speaker discussion, so I raised my hand. Hey, Ed, thanks. I learned a lot from you from the beginning, and, our agnostic meeting's still alive and well, and da-da-da-da. Well, the guy, first one of the two, were both in that meeting. The ones that were the spies who came in from mainstream AA and then told us that we were doing it wrong. Well, one of those guys showed up at the next agnostic meeting. I think they were checking up on us, making sure that we're following protocol. Right. And first I was going to tell the guys in the meeting that started the meeting, we had our spy back here checking on us. But, by the end of the meeting, all that left me because I'm not there to prove anything to anybody or go against anybody or argue with anybody. I recognize that he was in that meeting not for himself. Right. He's my buddy, Bob. But he's there to represent mainstream AA, and there's a reason for that. There is a reason that mainstream AA is what it is, because it's, as tradition protocol, has to follow a certain way of, that's their group consciousness is to follow it that way.
That's right. There's people in those groups, they want to do it that way.
And mainstream AA is that way for now, and hopefully we can open it up to addicts and other recovery people. We can all help each other in the near future. We can change for the better. Yes, it's not being defiant and changing AA. We're not trying to rewrite the steps. We're just trying to offer alternatives.
There you go. Exactly.
So I don't know how much time I have, but I had just a little one paragraph from Beyond Belief 12-Step Life, and I copied it on my phone. And I show it to people whenever they ask me, "What's all this agnostic stuff going on?" And how do you do it without a higher power or an other power or something? How do you do that? And I have to come up with something. So I said, well, I've highlighted a paragraph from this book, and I hand it to people. They can read it right off my phone, and get the book. Not me preaching. It's like I found something that works for me. And I'll tell you, I've been looking for an agnostic sponsor. There aren't any here. The women in my agnostic meeting, one is like fairly new, and the other one's very self-sufficient, and she doesn't want to be a sponsor. She's barely able to help herself. And then the other one travels so much, she's not around. And like I said, I can do a long-distance sponsorship. And she's like, yeah, I'll get back to you on that. So I have, like I said before, for the 4 years, followed mainstream AA and then came to the agnostics. And so for a year and a half, after I stepped back from mainstream AA, I have not been doing steps. I think I made it through step 6 at one point, one sponsor, and left it alone and never went back. So I've been sponsoring myself and putting myself through my own steps, and I'm happy to say that it's been working for me. So when somebody stands up at the podium and says, if you don't do these steps the way they're written, you're going to drink again, I have to not just raise my hand, but stand up and say, excuse me.
Good for you.
You may not be helping somebody by saying that.
Good for you.
First of all, my father's been sober for 40 years, and he did it without AA. And now I've done both. I've done it with AA and without AA, and there's alternatives that may help somebody.
Right.
Is the kind of wording I try.
Good for you.
Tread carefully. But I don't know if our time is almost up here.
Go ahead.
But I really wanted to share this with you.
Yeah.
This is the only thing I really had on my mind that I would share today. The rest is ad lib. But going back to the meditation and the Zen perspective, it says, and what page is this? Well, it goes by date, right?
Okay.
So I'm on August 26th here. Just a little, if I may read this.
Yeah, please.
With like a 2-second moment of silence, because I need to center for a second here. Because this is all of my recovery in one paragraph. Okay, quote, from a Zen perspective, enlightenment is attained by embracing emptiness, being, and nothingness. In this respect, wisdom comes from letting go, not from seeking. While one looks to the God of the heavens to be filled with serenity, courage, and wisdom, another merely divests themselves of chaos, fear, and biases. Both goals have no finish line. As recovery is about balance, we are going to get more done each day if we monitor our serenity, courage, and wisdom. This way, we are content in the process and not anticipating an end or a goal, unquote.
Yeah. That's excellent.
Now, that's pretty much what we were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Embracing emptiness, which is scary for some people, emptiness. They want to fill up that God-shaped hole, right? Which I've researched and the scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who everybody claims he's an atheist. He, in his own words, he goes, I never claimed I was an atheist.
Right.
He categorized me that way. But his version of emptiness, well, he talked about the emptiness in our lives that we fill with a substance or an addiction behavior, and it's created by craving. It's a craving. So you have a craving to begin with as a child or as an adult or whenever you recognize that it's been there all along. And when you find something, a person, place, thing, substance, whatever, to fill that, and it works for you, then you are creating more craving. The more you crave, the more you fill, it creates more craving. It's like digging a hole.
Right.
On a beach, and the water keeps filling it in. And so when people, and I always wondered, like, how the God-shaped hole, like I have a craving too, but I don't fill it up with a reliance on God, but I'm realizing what they're talking about.
Right.
My God-shaped hole is not in the form of a G, it's in the form of a C, and it's craving something. And I have to recognize that in my recovery, that's always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I fill that up with? And by reading this paragraph, and from a Zen perspective, it is embracing that emptiness and nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
and replace it only with a sense of being.
Yeah, I love it.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
And people just go, what do you mean that's enough? What is being? And I'm like, well, maybe you should go meditate on that.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. Everybody has their own. And, to finalize it all, like my Big Book Step Study sponsor, who I love, and my recent sponsor, too,
Mm-hmm.
I showed her this paragraph, and she looked at it, and she said, okay. And then she looked at me, she goes, but you are still seeking your higher power, right? I went, oops.
Yeah.
I knew right then and there that she can't help me. And she already said, I don't think I can help you because I haven't done it this way.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is my own experience from what I learned. She goes, I don't think I can help you with this,
Mm-hmm.
embracing nothingness. Because for her, it's seeking a higher power, and honing your relationship with a higher power is ultimately the goal of
Right.
recovery for her. And I realized that, sadly, we must part ways.
Yeah.
We can still be friends and get together for tea like we have been doing, but as far as working on the steps, she's wasting her. Shouldn't say wasting her time, because being a friend in recovery is an awesome thing.
Right.
I don't want to commit to having her try to help me
Sure.
when my perspective is different.
Right.
So different.
Right.
So very different. So for now, I'm helping myself, and I'm that's not the way I want it to always stay. I'm very open to having somebody who can relate to the alternative steps
Mm-hmm.
and can go through those together.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the journey is what it's all about, not the result.
I agree. Well, I think that's a good place to wind it up. I think that we came full circle from where we started, and it's just a beautiful conversation, beautiful. And you've helped me a lot, and inspired me to get on the ball with meditating. Maybe I'll do that actually this morning before I actually go out. I'm in Kansas City. We're doing this hall crawl thing in our district, so that I'm going to all these different traditional AA meetings. It started last night. Actually, it started Thursday at my group, We Agnostics, and it was kind of fun. We actually read from the grapevine that has the stories from atheists and agnostics. Then I went to a traditional meeting last night, and they read from the grapevine about a story from atheists and agnostics. That was wild. So now today I'm going to go to all these other traditional meetings, one after the next, all day long, and then all day tomorrow.
Wow.
So,
Thank you for reminding me that the grapevine has come out with the atheist agnostic writing.
Oh, yeah. It's a good issue.
And Roger had emailed me about that, and I haven't yet researched it. I want a copy of that, and I'll get one. But it's been very helpful that through Roger and through you, that my contribution, I feel like I have been able to do. It's been very frustrating, and I've been wanting to put something out there, and by even thinking I'm helping somebody else, it helps me.
Yeah.
And I hope that through evolution, recovery will open its arms to a whole new generation.
Yeah.
And introduce that generation to the long-timers who have been in it for a long time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's not about the substance. It's not so much about wanting to stop drinking as it is to stay stopped.
Right.
Like, how awesome is that if I can help my 15-year-old find serenity in his life now, he won't be having to chase it down for 39 years like I did.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to
Yvonne.
share. And I recommend picking up that Beyond Belief book. And,
absolutely. I've got it. And we'll post a link to that on the podcast, too.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
And every August 26th, I just like to highlight that little. And there's many more beautiful things in the book daily that I just point my finger right at it, going bingo. I couldn't have said it better myself. So I wish I had a meeting that we could read from this daily. We don't have that yet here. We're a little still, blue laws are still here, like retail stores are closed on Sunday. For whatever reason, I think people have to go to church or something.
Right.
It's open. It's getting, but liquor stores are open.
That's funny.
You can buy alcohol. You can go to church.
Yeah.
But you can't go shopping.
That is funny.
Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh, it's so much fun. But I love to travel and go to other meetings, and that has been really the highlight of my AA experience here. Is that I can just take the fellowship and recovery wherever I go, because people here have helped me so much in just telling their story of their experience, strength, and hope. I'm like, I'm not alone. Wherever I go, I'm not alone.
Yep.
So it's a beautiful thing.
We'll post this, not this coming Wednesday. I'm going to post, we're going to do it the following Wednesday, which I guess would be, today's the 15th. So next Wednesday, it'll be the 26th, if I'm looking at the calendar right, is when we'll post this podcast. And I'll send you a link to it so you can listen to it before we post it and stuff like that.
Oh, I really appreciate it, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope this opens things up for other people. And my favorite slogan is keep coming back.
Yeah. All right. You take care, Yvonne.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back soon enough. I think we'll take a break next week and be back the following week. Until then, you all take care, be well. We'll talk again soon.